Hi again then guys, and welcome to a review which some of you would probably not be expecting me to revisit, because generally speaking I don't tend to review the same cars twice on different games, if at all possible at least, unless there's some kind of significant change to it, be it the specs or the performance, or in the case of something like, for instance, a TVR Speed 12, for example. If that car were to come back, the way it would be presented in the game, because of it being more realistic, etc., would be considerably different, because something like a Speed 12 has gone through an incredible range of use in the franchise. Way back in Gran Turismo 2, it was very cool to have the car, but it wasn't the most competitive thing around. It was a pure straight-line machine with only pro-level drivers even coming close to trying to use it around corners. Then after that, of course, we got the Cerberus Speed 12 in its more famous form, the more bubbly shape. But then performance changed over the years, and it basically got different in each game in terms of how useful it was. In Gran Turismo 6, of course, it was severely neutered, and if it came back now, it would actually be a lot more competitive, because it's the exact kind of car that GT Sport favours, and that is track-focused vehicles, even if they're street legal. Now, in the case of a Veyron, why am I reviewing it again? Well, for essentially the same reason. The Veyron felt neutered to some degree in Gran Turismo 6, but for different reasons, and it certainly wasn't to do with straight-line speed, because it's one of the quickest cars in the game. It can easily pull 310 miles per hour without even needing a downhill section, draft, or nitrous. Now, though, the change is not just about straight-line speed. The change is actually much more so, I think, to do with the handling. Now, the Veyron has a certain reputation when it comes to its handling, and you could say for good reason. It's far from being a track day supercar, and it's not supposed to be a track day supercar. It's a luxury, extremely rapid, in a straight line kind of supercar, which happens to also potter around town like an Audi when you need it to. That's pretty great, and as I've mentioned before on the channel in stuff like the Bugatti Vision GT review, the Veyron is one of those cars that's very easy to become complacent about, because it's been the big deal for a number of years, and it's not the big deal anymore because there are all of these faster alternatives, especially when you're talking about the original Veyron, which is essentially this one, not the Super Sport or the Grand Sport, or now of course the Chiron. You've got stuff like the Ultima Aero, the Koenigsegg Gira RS, the Regera, the 1-to-1, the Hennessy Venom GT, various others which are a lot faster, some of them even officially a lot faster. So the question is, why should you even consider the Veyron now? And also, why did they bother to put it in the game? Because that may seem like an obvious answer. Well, it's a Veyron, why wouldn't you? But at the same time, there are lots of cars which could arguably be a lot more useful than the Veyron, which they didn't carry over, at least not yet. So, although we can't specifically answer why they brought this one back, we can consider what it's like now, because I would personally say that the Veyron is a lot better on Gran Turismo Sport than it was on GT6, because straight-line speed, be it acceleration off the line or top speed, is all well and good. But that was pretty much all the Veyron was good for. You could take it around a track if you wanted to, but the way the game interpreted the car's aero design, in particular with the movable wings, the way the car would just lock up in terms of its handling over a certain speed, it meant that it just always felt neutered by its own tech. Whereas now, that just doesn't happen. The car actually feels much better around corners than it has before. Now, of course, that is dependent on the kind of tuning you do, how much or how little power you give it, but this one that I'm driving in the video, as you can see, is running on sports soft tyres, not racing tyres, and it's fully upgraded. It's got well over, 1100 horsepower, I think, so it's not exactly safe in terms of tuning. I put it in an environment where you could really feel what it would be like with a huge amount of power to deal with. It's already got a huge amount of power, but let's give it even more to see what it handles like. In a similar way to the old Leash the Beast tuning series that I used to do, where we give the car as much power as possible to help to control that power, so that any amount less will by definition be easier. That was what I wanted to discover with this car, because I've driven it before in the game. Of course, I did the drag tune for it, which is the obvious reason why most people would use a Veyron. But what about around a track? Well, in terms of the spec, for instance, and what it can contribute to its track performance, you know what you're getting into. Less than 1,000 horsepower, but not by much, 986. 922 pound-feet of torque, of course all from that EB16.4 specification, 16 cylinders, 4 turbos, 9 radiators, something like that, W configuration instead of a V, and it weighs a lot. 1,888 kilos is no slouch. It's kind of like a drivable Meteor to some degree. The horsepower per tonne is 522, which all things considered actually isn't that bad for such a heavy car. But with the Veyron, the potential that it has can instantly be seen as soon as you drive the Group 4 version, which again I have already reviewed, but that car shocked me by how good it was. Because for me, although I'm not a super fan of the Veyron, I have respect for it, just like the Nissan GT-R and a couple of others, but I don't love it, and I've never loved the Veyron, and I don't love the Chiron either. But that Group 4 version did to the Veyron what I've been hoping that they would do for it, or to it, for years. I wanted to see a stripped out, hardcore, track-focused Veyron GT1 in effect. And although the Group 4 car, of course, is not to GT1 regulations, it doesn't even look that way, it's actually much more like an N24 car in effect. What it does is show the raw potential of a Veyron when you're allowed to go above and beyond. As far as tuning, it's such a lightweight car and it allows it to fly through corners, and of course balance of performance does new to that unfortunately, but at least on its own you can feel how good it can be. This one has a huge advantage over that car in terms of power. That one peaks out at like 500 or so, this one of course over 1100, but it's a whole lot heavier. Essentially a tonne heavier in fact in its stock form. Now the handling is better, I would say, because it feels more loose. The understeer in particular on this car is far more manageable than it was on Gran Turismo 6, even with tuning. And that's kind of ironic because a number of people have said about GT Sport that a lot of the all-wheel drive cars actually feel heavier than they used to. And I agree with that, a lot of them do. The GTR, for instance, definitely does, compared to the Black Edition in particular. This one, ironically, is the opposite. It feels better than it used to. So for 2 million credits, is it the kind of car that I'd recommend that you rush out and buy immediately? Well, no, of course not. The tuning range of a Veyron has never been that great anyway, because even with reduced power, it's still, like an N600 or N700 car. It's not really a competitive machine under most circumstances, which again begs the question of why they chose to keep it in the game. I'm not complaining that they did, it's just a strange choice in a game that doesn't really favour cars like this. But at least for those who are Veyron fans, it's nice to know that, I would say at least, it feels better than it used to. So if you do want to use it competitively, you might actually want to give it a shot. But that's it for this pick overall. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.